We're down to the championship in most leagues. We had a wild game on Christmas night that had a big impact on seeding in the NFL. Here to help me break down Week 16 is Alan Seslowsky on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the good folks from Circa, OddsR, and SmashUp Fantasy Sports. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Alan Seslowsky. Alan, how was your Christmas?
Christmas was stressful, man, because of the sweats going on with fantasy football. Right. Christmas itself was fine. I mean, we always go to like a Brazilian barbecue. That's our annual Christmas dinner. Okay. But as far as like the football stuff, it's so aggravating, man. I don't know what we keep it. Just when we thought we were out, they pull us back in. I'm sure everyone has a story where they should have started this guy over that guy, or if I just had one more catch. But when it happens, it doesn't deserve it. It shouldn't be happening to me. It should only be happening to everyone else. Those negative things.
Right. Of course. Of course. How are your fantasy semifinals? Did you have a lot of them going on?
So 41 leagues total for me. Okay. I'm going to be in 9 finals, and I'm in 8 consolation games that have at least your money back cash prizes. And then half of my teams, I think 10 or 11, out for that got knocked out. So still a chance to be profitable for the year.
All right.
How about yourself?
Very good. I don't play in as many leagues as you. I'm in 3 finals. 3 out of 19. It's not a good year, actually. I feel like I had a pretty bad year. Now I cashed in NFFC prime time, so made some money there. Finished 3rd in my league, and then there's the overall, but I'm like 130th in the overall, so I'm not going to win money there. But
what was your worst beat, like either leading into the playoffs or the thing that knocked you out, or what was the one thing that was, the annoying thing that no one cares about because it's only your league?
That's a good question. I'm thinking about it that way.
While you're thinking it through, I just needed one more catch from Barkley on the final drive last night to be into a $700, final. Instead, I'm in the $50 get your money back game.
Oh, wow, that's brutal.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I don't know if I had a worse beat. The ones that I lost. It is like. In some cases, I ran into Cooper, but I had Cooper in a league. So
yeah,
it's not a beat. That's the way it's just football. It's just fantasy. That's the way
That's not a bad beat. It's a beat and it stings, but it's not a bad beat where there was like the referee did something that screwed you, or it's normal fan. Like, I was trying to tell somebody, I kept agonizing over like Evan Ingram versus Trey McBride, and I've gotten it wrong the last 3 weeks, and it's cost me. That's normal fantasy football. Like I consciously made that decision. By the way, anyone listening in the chat, put in your worst beat for this past week 16. I love reading these things.
I like it.
Yeah, I love hearing about other people's misery, so I can feel a little bit better about mine.
I'll say, here's my answer. My answer is getting notifications of Justin Jefferson and Breece Hall going off in a league where I was long eliminated, and seeing like Justin Jefferson just made a big play. Justin Jefferson just scored a touchdown. Yeah, I mean, yeah. That was probably that. And then Bengals stuff all aside, I mean, Bengals.
That's real football. That doesn't count.
Football beat. Yeah, that doesn't count. But that's actually my worst beat of the year is the Burrow injury.
I saw a friend of this show, Scott Pianowski, put what you just said into words in the tweet. He said, "I want to annually thank my team for going off the week after I need them," in some way like that. But
nothing more reliable than seeing that happen. Absolutely, it's so true.
I love it. This stuff makes me laugh, man. It really does, because I see how pissed people get, and they're like, how come you don't care? I go, maybe I'm just like a grizzled veteran at getting beat up in fantasy,
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's the way you got to treat that. It's our business, but it's also a hobby too, right? And so you have to kind of just take that with it. We're not splitting the atom here, and we're also not saving or killing lives, for the most part. I mean, there's some good charitable things that our community does and all that, blah, blah, blah. But, in terms of, it's not the most heft in the world, but it matters to us still nonetheless a lot. All right.
Yeah. Passionate. I think fantasy football players, content creators are some of the most passionate people in the world. Sports fans in general are.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's recap the week. start off with the battle of the century of the week with the Ravens and the Niners, and did not turn out as most people expected. I think maybe people might have thought that the Ravens could beat the Niners, but to absolutely squash them like they did, destroyed them, really. Okay, yes, they got within 2 touchdowns late. I mean, that's saying something. But then, I mean, the Ravens crushed them. I'm duly impressed, Alan.
Yeah, I'm not as surprised as I was surprised that people were surprised. Like when I was talking with some of our other colleagues, like, yeah, because I posed the question a couple weeks ago is who gives the 49ers the best matchup in the NFL? Like who is the one that's going to give them trouble? I was expecting someone to maybe say the Rams, like so, and the consensus feedback was no. This is like the elite team, and then there's everyone else fighting for scraps. I'm like, it never made sense because this is the NFL. We've seen the worst team beat the best team. We've seen 15-point dogs win for. So it never surprises me. Plus, this Brock Purdy for MVP thing that was basically minus 200 before this game, Jeff, it just never felt right. Like it was like, okay, he's like the guy on the most winning team, but it always felt like how we felt about Tua in past years. He was being dragged to relevance through his setup. Whereas Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, those were clearly like have been the 2 best players. So it's not as shocking to me that this happened.
Yeah. And hey, I'd say their biggest rival is the AFC North because the Bengals smashed them too. The Browns beat them. Now the Browns beat them. Browns was in the muck and all that, but I mean, they beat them with PJ Walker.
Yeah. Who, by the way, was re-signed to the active roster today.
Yeah. So yeah, that's wild too. But so maybe it's just there's something there that, hey, and yes, Debo wasn't playing. I get it. Debo got hurt against the Browns, but he was playing last night, and the Ravens, and the Ravens are better than the Bengals anyhow. If Burrow doesn't get hurt, then we can talk about that. But even then, they were beating the Bengals that game too.
Yeah. Well, the Ravens wise though, I mean, I was a little bit nervous because for the Ravens, like the only I guess clear weakness is they don't really have a good running back, right? They have Gus Edwards, who's a good goal line back, but Keaton Mitchell was like that home run guy, right? He was the one that on 7 or 8 carries can break a 50, 60-yard run. That like that real, he was like the running back version of what Deshaun Jackson used to be back in the day, right? Like you have to really account for him when he's on the field. But yeah, man, you are right in the sense where I did not expect this to be like a domination thing, but this happens in the NFL and it happens all the time. And as you saw, Lamar Jackson, like when you have that ability to extend and escape plays and just really, I mean, he is the true MVP right now. And I hope you got him when he was like, double digits to 1, because right now, I mean, I have to look at the rest of their schedule, but I mean,
Ravens play the Dolphins this week.
Right. I mean,
and they get, it's obviously a division matchup the last week of the season. I think it's Steelers, right?
Yes. And even if they lose to Miami, if Lamar shows well, just, plays his normal 250 and 2 with maybe like 40 yards rushing, that's still going to keep him as the MVP.
Yeah. I think the whole thing about the MVP debate is like you wanted to talk about fading fading the concept of fading Brock Purdy. The problem is you can't just bet. It's not like craps. You can't bet the don't. You have to pick somebody else to fade it. I mean, there's no like, I want the does not win MVP bet. That's harder to find.
Right. Yeah. Well, Dak was a very reasonable bet when he was coming out of the bye at 35 to 1. That was the one I put my chip on. That didn't win. Like I said, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen were the eye test ones. So going back though to San Francisco in this game last night was that it was also interesting. If anyone out there that was playing fantasy that had Brandon Ayuk and you needed him, he had 1 target like through most of the game, right? And 1 target, 1 catch, 18 yards. And then I wouldn't call it garbage time, but in catch-up time, he actually he came home last night. So I was a little surprised that the 49ers weren't targeting him more when the game really mattered. Well, it always mattered, but in the first half, so to speak.
Yeah. That was massive. Debo got 12 targets, only 4 catches for all those targets. That's crazy. But I mean, the thing is, Kittle was effective. They moved the ball. They just they screwed up in the red zone. They had all those turnovers. I mean, 4 interceptions, 5 interceptions. I mean, because you include Darnold's there too at the end. Adam was talking about bad beats. He was going up against the Baltimore defense last night had a 9.5-point lead. I mean, I benched the Baltimore defense in one league for the Eagles. Eagles were available, and I'm like, against the Giants. Hey, process was right. Chris Liss is yelling at me. The process is never right, but
right. Yeah, it's right. The process is right. You always you always stay on any card when the dealer has a 6, except when it's a 5 under there, and then he pulls a 10 after. Then the process was horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Any other takeaways from this game before we move on?
Yeah. Just that draft capital matters. Had Sam Darnold, and I'm talking about Brock Purdy, of course, because had Sam Darnold brought them back and won that game, and that was within the range of outcomes, there would be a real quarterback controversy today. Not if Brock Purdy was a first-round pick, but because of who he is. So you could say all these things about like, oh, yeah, he's past that. But just keep in mind, that kind of stuff actually does matter.
Yeah, I guess it does. They play the Commanders this week, so get well week there. It could be there. But we'll see. I mean, if Darnold can't, if Purdy can't play, how interested are you in streaming Darnold this week?
Very, especially in my 2 quarterback superflex leagues. Put any competent guy in that San Francisco 49ers offense, and it's going to go. I mean, Sam Darnold was the number 1. He was the first free agent signed in March, and that was by Shanahan before they knew Brock Purdy was going to be healthy. The other quick thing, Jeff, Christian McCaffrey, the number 1 overall pick, even at age 28 next year.
Hard to go against that, right?
I mean, if you like one of the receivers.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. Jefferson showed on Sunday why he's or on Saturday. Yeah. Sunday. Yeah. My days are all messed up, dude. I showed against the Lions why he is him. I mean, he can do that with Nick Mullins. He can do that with Cousins. He can do it with whoever his quarterback is, as long as he's healthy. I might still make a case for Jefferson, but I'll be the nice guy. I'll draft second.
Yeah, right. Well, if Kirk Cousins isn't ready to go, then I would be very skeptical about playing the first 6 weeks without him. I mean, Nick Mullins, like you said, was good enough, but it looks like Kirk Cousins actually was a lot more important than a lot of people thought to that team.
Probably so. Let's move on to the Eagles and the Giants. Ugly game, really, for the Eagles. I mean, they were comfortably ahead, and then they fumble the opening kickoff of the second half. Hurts throws a pick 6. They're kind of hanging on for dear life in this game, and the passing game has kind of been a concern. Hurts got your fantasy production, but not all is right with this offense.
I mean, Hurts still had 300 yards passing. I mean, yeah, I know what you're saying. Like it doesn't look like it, and it's a lot of yak. 1 touchdown, 1 pick. AJ Brown eventually got you there. He had 3 receivers over 70 yards, so he is giving it off to his big 3. So if you started any of your AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, or Dallas Goedert, you got what you paid for, right? I mean, you weren't disappointed there. DeAndre Swift, it was so funny that when he got tackled early, on the goal,
that was not funny,
right? Because
not funny.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times does DeAndre Swift have to get tackled at the 1? How many? And then he loses another touchdown when his own teammate knocks him down. Yeah. And he actually loses yards on the play instead he gets the touchdown. And you could see on the super slow-mo replay that, his knee did brush the turf. So it was the right decision. But I'm like, really? Yep. Really, dude? Come on. The universe, I tweeted out, the universe finds I'm amazed at the extent the universe goes to deny DeAndre Swift a touchdown. But he did get it later on, so we got that going for us. But
you should have been used to it by now, though, right? Like that's been the whole season. Is when it goes inside the 3 or 4 yard line, it's tush push time. And I mean, what's the conversion rate on? Is it 100%? Is it 97?
Not quite. He fumbled once, actually, but it's like 90%. It's still ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like it gets to the 2 yard line. Like Swift will get the ball at the 4 and he'll take it to the 1. And I'm like, he almost gets in. I'll just reward him just once. No, but I get it rationally. If this is going to work every time, you do it every time.
Right.
I mean, I understand it. I get it. I don't blame the Eagles. Although I almost wonder if there's a physical toll it's taking on Hurts at all.
Oh, definitely. I mean, how could it not? But this is what you do. You're paying the guy because this is what works. The idea is to win, right? So
but is there a long-term impact that hurts him? Is my
sure. Point. Yeah. I mean, look, famously, Jalen Hurts is like squatting 600 pounds.
Yeah.
This is part of that skill set, right? You could squat 600 pounds. You can move into the end zone. So Cam Newton's the obvious example, right? It took years. Like usually at age 30, we're beginning their second peak in their career. Like look at, we talked about Kirk Cousins a minute ago at age 35. Cam Newton's out of the league at 29, 30 years old. So there is a very good chance if you're in like a long-term keeper dynasty stuff that Jalen Hurts has that same fate, right? Because he's like you just pointed out, he's not like a prolific passer. So, but in the short term, while they're trying to win a Super Bowl, they're just going to do what they need to do to win. I just,
might hurt their efforts to win the Super Bowl too, though. If it makes them a lesser passer, if it makes them, a little bit compromised, and even now this year, I don't know, it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Giants switched out the quarterbacks. Tyrod Taylor took over in the second half, was better than Tommy Cutlets. Do you think that Taylor starts this upcoming week, and does that matter?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious joke here is that Tommy DeVito got whacked, right? I mean, that's par for the course. Well, but yeah, Tyrod Taylor just looked better, right? He looked like a professional quarterback, where Tommy DeVito looked more like that amazing run that Jeremy Lin had for the New York Knicks about 10, 12 years ago, where it just was insane. Like he was on fire, and then it kind of right off the cliff. And you got more than you thought. And Tommy DeVito was a fun story, the agent, all that other stuff. But Tyrod Taylor, not only does he look like a professional quarterback, like he's probably going to start the year if Daniel Jones isn't ready, or there might be other opportunities for Tyrod Taylor to start around the league for teams that aren't confident in their starter. Say Kenny Pickett, right? Or, Washington, or the teams that are going to be out of striking distance or that aren't confident in their rookie. So yes, I think he'll start next year. I'm very interested to see what happens with Saquon Barkley next year. I mean, you got your 23 carries for 80 yards and a touch this week, but man, it's hard. It's hard gettings with Saquon Barkley. That team just looks like sometimes that they're struggling for every positive play.
Right. But is that because of Barkley, or is it because of their atrocious line? I think
atrocious line.
Yeah, of course. I'll say one other thing about DeVito. This is the year of the backup quarterback, both in terms of the rise and prominence and the number of them, and also the turning into a pumpkin aspect of it. We saw it with Jake Browning this week. We saw it with Joshua Dobbs. We saw it with, a number of them like Nick Mullins. We saw it all in one game. You saw the yards, and we saw the 4 interceptions. We've seen like, okay, there's a reason why these guys are career backups. Joe Flacco is like playoff winner Joe Flacco. He's like the exception so far, but he's also 38. I mean, he's actually been vetted in this league a little bit more. But I feel like, these quarterbacks can have their moments, but it is going to ring midnight for almost all of them.
I love that you brought up that point, right? Like that's why these guys are backups. They're good, like silly putty to plug a hole in a raft, but they're not like a permanent fix. So very good point. Could Joe Flacco be the next one? Like people are in their fantasy final. Flacco, they have a tough matchup with
Thursday against the Jets.
Right. Tough matchup. But if you have Joe Flacco or say like Kyler Murray, I mean, that's going to be a real question. Kyler Murray has the rushing upside, but it's been okay. Joe Flacco has been league winner, like an actual league winner. You almost can't bench this guy. I don't care what the Jets, what they're. I think they're the best ranked defense, right? Yards.
Yeah, they've made every quarterback feel the pain. It is so crazy how like so many good quarterbacks have had terrible games against them.
Justin Herbert had his career worst game against them.
Patrick Mahomes had a terrible game. Well, we thought that was all Jets. Then we realized it's also all Chiefs. But we'll get there in a second. You go down the list. Jalen Hurts had his worst game, against them.
You're gonna get a lot of starts at questions with Joe Flacco. But when you do your value meter, which is posted on RotoWire every week, he's going to be in your top 12. I just can't see how he wouldn't be at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if he even was this past week, but it's going to be close. I think it's. I'd go Stafford ahead of Flacco.
Yes.
Stafford gets the Giants this week, so I kind of prefer that. Before we move on to Chiefs Raiders, a quick note from our friends on the Blue Wire Network. We like being on there. Appreciate your indulgence. Let's talk the third Christmas game, Chiefs Raiders. Alan, this is the culmination of two different things. This is one, all the problems that the Chiefs have had all year. We saw it come to its peak, I feel like. But also, the Raiders, they're a real team. This is, 3 really good defensive performances in a row. I mean, remember, they lost the shutout game against the Vikings 3-0. people got to remember that's what caused Joshua Dobbs to get benched and turned into a pumpkin in the first place. It's just that the offense and Aiden O'Connell was so tragic. But then last week in the let's quit on Staley game, they were dominant in that game. Easton Stick had no chance in that game. Maybe some of this was not the Chargers quitting, but maybe the Raiders playing good. I feel like I made this point on the Chris Harris podcast. The Bears and the Raiders are real teams now. They're not jokes. They're not punchlines. They're real defenses, and we should be wary of them.
Yeah, I was going to throw your usual pun joke back at you when you said they're a real team. I was going to say, yes, Jeff, they do exist. That's a Jeff Erickson bag of tricks joke right there. But yeah, I think that, with the Raiders, by the way, have two very interesting outcomes. They could end up winning the division. Believe it or not, that's actually mathematically possible.
Right.
And I think their next two games, if they win out, I think they have like an 80% chance. There's a couple of things that need to happen for them to get in the playoffs. The real question for the Raiders is, will Antonio Pierce be the coach next year? I mean, the obvious thing is to say, yes, look what he's done with the team. But I don't know if you remember back to your dating days, Jeff Erickson, but those first few dates are always good, man. It's what happened. Once the luster wears off a little bit, is this the guy we want in charge of the whole thing? Is this the person that you want to move forward with? And yes, for me, right? I mean, I love that he's in the right generation, meaning he's far enough away, retired, where he's still perceived as like an adult, but he's close enough retired where he could still relate to the players and their age. He's not. Right. So I think he's like a Dan Campbell-esque guy, like a rah-rah, let's go guy. He may not be the most prolific X's and O's guy as far as we know, but I don't think that's what you need in a head coach. Like, hire one of those guys, right? There's so many of these college geniuses or whoever you want to call them plays, but seems like the right guy at the right time that to lead the Raiders next year, because they could easily be a 10-win team if they had Antonio Pierce in the beginning.
Yeah, I was just going to say they need to hire an offensive coordinator. They need to figure out quarterback. But, yeah, I agree. I think there are some really positive things. We haven't had to see his acumen as a, play caller. Well, not play caller, obviously, but as a
down and distance type of guy,
down and distance sort of decision sort of guy yet. We really haven't seen a whole lot of that, but you've seen him rally the troops. That's for sure. Granted, sometimes it's just the change. Any change can be good when you get out of the Josh McDaniels malaise. So that might have a big part of that there, but hey, good on him for doing so. The Chiefs, man, Mahomes couldn't find anybody all day, starting from the very first series. I don't know if he was off in his own right too. If he was just playing badly, it's possible. I think the pick six, he definitely made a terrible decision, but I think it all stemmed from him not being able to find anybody. I mean, we keep on beating this drum that he's got no receivers. He had no receivers. He nobody was getting open. I mean, Rashee Rice and him weren't on the same page a couple of times. I noticed that, but it was really arresting to see how ineffective this offense was.
Yeah, I'm going to summon your normal broadcast partner, Nick Whalen, and do a cross-sport reference here. This seems like the LeBron James teams that had nobody else on Cleveland, right? Like where it's Mahomes and then a bunch of guys, and the bunch of guys are frustrating Patrick Mahomes. And then the football comparison, I think the easy one is the Patriots teams with Tom Brady when Julian Edelman was their best player, right? Like an 1,100-ish yard Julian Edelman. That's kind of what Kelsey's going to end up with. And then after that, it was washed up Josh Gordon. It was Philip Dorsett. Like, that's the cast of characters. And I think Jacoby Myers was a rookie that year. That's kind of like what Mahomes is dealing with right now. And that year, I think it was 17 or 19. I forget which year it was. Brady, even though they were a high seed, they had a first round exit out of the playoffs, or their first game, whatever if they were a bye team. So I think that's pretty much in play, right? I mean, you hear a lot of like kind of tongue in cheek blaming Taylor Swift since they've been 3-5 since her and Kelsey announced that they were dating and that he's only had one touchdown. But you know what the Taylor Swift thing reminds me of, Jeff Erickson? You remember Jessica Simpson and Tony Romo, how she put the kibosh on him about a decade or so ago?
I do remember that they dated, yes.
Well, and that Tony Romo didn't play well after that they came out. So,
sloppy analysis is all I'm saying. sloppy. It's just, yes, they won a Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill last year, so we can say they know what they're doing as far as that goes, but I don't think I think that they just it was too many things, and it finally came to roost. Now, Isaiah Pacheco left with a concussion late in this game. Next week, if Josh Jacobs doesn't play and Pacheco doesn't play, who are you more interested in? Zamir White against Indy or Clyde Edwards-Helaire against the Bengals?
It's an easy answer for me. It's Zamir White. He's produced big-time yardage 2 weeks in a row. He had 145 yards, Zamir White, that is. This week, didn't do much in the passing game or score a touchdown. So it's only, it's a modest fantasy output, but he's a good player, right? Everyone liked Zamir White coming out of Georgia. I know our guys, Mario and John, do all the college analysis for us. Really liked him. And, the only reason that he fell to the 4th round in the real NFL drafts is because he had some knee issues. He's a 2nd round level talent that was drafted in the 4th round. He just never really got a chance. This is a good running back. He could be in your top 15 when you do your value meter rankings,
which I'll be doing later today, late tonight, actually. I'll throw one other name in there. Khalil Herbert, assuming that Deonta Foreman's not playing. Khalil Herbert's at home against Atlanta this week. He ran for over 100 yards against the run funnel that is Arizona. Where does he slide in that continuum?
I think that's a great grouping, great tier there. I'm still going to stick with Zamir White.
Okay.
For the reason is that he's primary back without a running quarterback, whereas Khalil Herbert, it's still, Roschon Johnson's still there. He exists, right? And Justin Fields has got to be treated like a committee back. He's going to have 6 to 8 rushes. So great options. Like in some of my leagues where I'm just, that I'm in a final or a consolation game, I would love to have any of these guys. But if I have them all on my bench, I would start Zamir White over players with definite roles like a Jaylen Warren type.
Yeah. Well, and Warren obviously took a back seat to Harris this past week. After it's so funny. The second they say that Warren's going to get more work than Harris, the opposite has happened. So funny.
Yeah. As so is fantasy football, right? All the information you get. If you just did the opposite of everything that you think you should do, I wonder if that would still yield 58%.
Costanza your way to the title.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The Bizarro, the Costanza, just do opposite everything, man. It is wild out there. Especially if you get a lot of your information from social media, podcasts. You hear a lot of people that have these definite takes and these definite things. And man, the truth is we're fortune tellers, right? We don't really know. We're doing our best to rub our crystal ball. We're using our best experience and trying to give you what we think is right. But man, the NFL is so random.
Yeah. It is wild out there. Nowhere else it's wild is Circa Las Vegas, especially going to be during Super Bowl week. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Alan is all about pyrotechnic and visual effects. Let me tell you about that. Snag the best seat in the sun with daybeds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the Big Game Bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties, only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve at circalasvegas.com. Jeff Erickson here with Alan Seslowsky, and let's talk about the least watched Sunday night football game ever. Patriots upsetting the Broncos in Denver on NFL Network.
Yeah, by the way, Circa, best hotel in Vegas. I
love it.
They are the 1.01 of all-time Vegas. If you have not been out to Circa and you are into sports in any way, it's like you've walked in. You would be able to die and go to heaven, and that's what it would look like if you were anything into sports. So
yeah, most casinos, they put the sports book. It's the redheaded stepchild. They put it in the corner. Nobody puts Circa in the corner there. It's like, it is massive. It is ridiculous. And it's not just the sports book itself, but the bars, everywhere you go, you're surrounded by sports. By the pool, it's amazing. You can bet at the pool. I mean, most places you can't do that.
You can bet in the pool. While you're in a pool, you can bet, play blackjack in that little.
But you can sports bet at the pool.
Oh, interesting.
They have a sports book out the pool as well. It's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get this New England Denver game. Let's crank this out here.
Sure.
All right. Marvin Mims is interesting to me if Cortland Sutton doesn't play. Got the concussion. or checking for concussion symptoms. So Mims has, but it's the same thing we hear all year long. It's like, man, if only they give Mims 10 targets, it'd be amazing what would happen. They're never going to give him 10 targets, but he can hit for 3 big plays. That's all it takes. He could do it.
I'm looking here. Is it 8 or 9 receivers that Russell Wilson spread the ball to? If you include Michael Burton, who had a 1 catch for 4 yards, but that just means that nobody's going to get 10 targets, right? I mean, or 10 catches. So you can play Marvin Mims in a pinch, and I think we like his talent, but he's going to be one of those second-year receivers that we like drafting in like the 8th to 10th round next year. And man, if I'm in a fantasy final and I'm scrapping around, Marvin Mims makes me nervous, Jeff, not for any of the reasons that you identified with his talent, just because of the dynamic of this team. You would like to see maybe that Jerry Jeudy is a little bit that has the best chance, but man, it's just like
Judy's just a guy, though. That's the thing. Mims could be special. I'm ready to move.
That's fair.
I'm ready to pull up stakes on Jerry Jeudy. I have him in a dynasty league. It's a deep dynasty league, so we keep like 15 players. He's probably a top 15 player. But I don't want to have to start him ever.
Do you think that he's a player that could be on a different team next year? I mean, I was very in tune with his contract status last year. I think that did they 5th-year option him, which might have been, I have to look that up. But anyway, if he is just out there to like roam the free agency, there's going to be teams that are interested in him because he's the name. And if free agents next year, Jim, it's like the number one guy is like Gabe Davis. I mean, T. Higgins, he's not really a free agent. There's, in my opinion, there's no way they're letting him walk out the door with this nucleus. They'll tag him once.
To answer your question, they exercised a team option for 2024 already. They did that in May this year.
Right.
So 1 year's $12.99 million for Jeudy for the Broncos. So he's not going anywhere.
Or he'll be traded for a late round pick. If
he strikes me as one of those guys that, if he's only put in the right spot where people can appreciate his talents, he'll go off, and it never happens. No. He's the Duke Johnson of wide receivers.
I think you hit on something there. That is a very good. You know what? As they say in social media, stealing this like that. I like that a lot. The one that we had all these high expectations for, and it just, even when he had the opportunity, it never happened. So yeah, I think you hit it there. If you made it to your fantasy final with Javonte Williams, by
the way.
Oh, you did. Well, you still have to play him, right? I mean, you still have a floor of 10 carries.
I have the most garbage running backs in a championship.
Javonte
Williams and Tyler Algier are my starting running backs in this league. And I lost Keenan Allen in this league, but it's a super flex league, and I have to decide about Brock Purdy now too. But it's really it's remarkable, kind of smoke and mirrors. But
what got you there? The Keenan Allen
receivers.
Oh, okay.
Amari Cooper went nuts. Made up for the fact that I had someone that didn't go off that usually goes off too, and I lost Keenan Allen, so it was wild. But nonetheless. I don't know where my point was with that.
Yeah, no, we were talking about Javonte on the Broncos. So that also leads
to running backs. Yes.
Yeah. It also, by the way, leads to Russell Wilson, who, for all his faults, has been a very good fantasy quarterback this year. Not excellent, not elite, but in a 2-quarterback league, every week starter. And, if you drafted Russell Wilson in like the 14th round this year, he was perfectly fine. Denver, I mean, they're in a must-win situation. That was crazy how they lost to New England, man. It's like, New England
doesn't even want to win.
Well, the players want to win, but the fans,
the franchise, the organization doesn't.
No. And they have the worst kicker in the entire league. That guy, right?
Like, I mean, a 56-yarder.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
it was like no doubt that was going to be good.
And he wears a stupid number 37, Chad Ryland, right? I mean, it's so, that's usually something that happens to the Jets, right? Like they have the Trevor Lawrence thing all lined up. We could talk about, about Trevor in a little while, but they have it all lined up a couple years ago, and then they win a game, and then their consolation prize for winning that game is Zach Wilson, baby. That's kind of what just happened to the Patriots, who now are not in the Caleb Williams, Drake May sweepstakes. I mean, they can end up there, but probably not. So thanks, Chad Ryland.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, 4th.
And they might not even be in the kid from LSU sweepstakes.
Jaden Daniels is the guy's name.
Yep.
They can get there though. You can move up one spot. It's very difficult without basically, mortgaging your house to get up to
Carolina. How that's working out too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's dangerous. You can move up a spot. They're still in Jaden Daniels. That's a good point that you bring up because he could end up being better than the other two. We just don't know yet.
Yeah. Miami and Dallas, the game of the day of the week. Since we can't, it's not the game of the week, but Miami Dallas, a big game, a lot of heft to this game, a lot of meaning to it. Miami loses. They lose Waddle in this game. Basically, it's Tyreek Hill with a little Durham Smythe mixed in. They settle for a ton of field goals and they win as time expires. Finally beat a good team, but it was kind of the fraud bowl because Dallas can't beat anybody on the road. This is like Dallas against the road, Miami versus a good team. Miami prevails by 2.
Devon Achane was the guy that is frustrating most fantasy managers because he's had those explosive weeks.
Yeah.
And then he goes out and he gets injured and then you can't bench him. Like you couldn't live with yourself if you had a 35-point week with Achane on your bench. So you started him and he basically gets you 7 carries for 24 yards and another catch for 7 yards. It's almost very Kadarius Toney like. Now again, I have way more optimism for Devon Achane next year. I think he'll be a 2nd or 3rd round pick in fantasy drafts, but you remember Kadarius Toney kept getting drafted in like the 4th round, the 8th round. I mean, because of like 2 plays he had against Dallas as a Giant a handful of years ago. You're not going to be able to unseed Devon Achane, and like I said, it probably cost you a playoff matchup. Next week, though, they're saying Jalen Waddle, Jeff, might be out for the rest of you're not going to have him next week. You're not. So, is there anyone else?
Baltimore, no less, too.
Right. So, is there anyone else? Are you starting like a Cedric Wilson type?
So I just did Chris Harris's free agent podcast list, and he made my honorable mention. I just couldn't recommend him. Like I'd go KJ Osborne over Cedric Wilson. I'd go Mims over Cedric Wilson. It's tough to pick up. It's hard to find wide receivers to pick up right now. Others that I considered, DJ Chark, I consider Melton from Green Bay if all those other injured receivers are missing because they got a bunch of injured receivers right now. Alec Pierce I'd consider too, though it's turning out I want to avoid the Raiders as it turns out, so I don't know.
Yeah. Now you're making good sense there. I think that Durham Smythe, is probably the guy. He had the 2nd most targets in this game. He ended up with 5 receptions for 56 yards. Now, again, that's not a wide receiver replacement, but I think that if you are in a pinch, if you lost TJ Hawkinson, for example, this week, and he doesn't play next week, Smythe is somebody that if you're in any sort of like premium format that I would be interested in, not because we love Durham Smythe, but because he could end up being the 2nd most targeted player after Tyreek Hill next week.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I'm glad you mentioned Hawkinson. We'll get to Hawkinson and that Minnesota-Detroit game, but that's a huge injury. Huge injury there. So, yeah, absolutely could see that.
Is he tight end 1 next year, Jeff? Like in fantasy draft? Like, forget where they go. There's not going to be a 1st-round tight end, but will he, if you're just doing your rankings off the top of your head right now, and obviously they're going to change 75 times, will he be your tight end 1?
I don't think there's a clear tight end 1. I don't even think there's a tight end 2 clear. I think you could make an argument for Laporta too.
Yeah.
Just as easily.
Those 2, I think, are the 1 and 2. I wouldn't. Kelsey Andrews, if he's healthy, will be 3 prop for me. But I think the real takeaway is we're not going to see a tight end drafted and redraft until the late 3rd round or middle of the 3rd round.
Which means Travis Kelce's a bargain again. After
4th
being
round.
a ripoff this year.
Right. Well,
he was a bargain last year because remember last year was the year, these older tight ends, they start to fall. There's not as big of a gap between Kelce and the pack. And then it turns out there was a massive gap between Kelce and the back.
Yep. It also depends on what they do. I think Kelce at this point of his career would benefit if they get another credible pass catcher there. It wouldn't be because he wouldn't be getting double teamed all the time. Like, just again, I'm just going to make this up. It's not going to happen. But like if Devontae Adams was a Chief, right? Then you would say, okay, Kelce would not have those mega seasons, but it would probably benefit him.
Yeah, he's not having that mega season this year.
No.
Actually, I'd argue that they need a better wide receiver to help him out too. That it's just in terms of getting people open, drawing some of the attention away. It's just been too much.
Yep. Do you on the season, and he's had a bad, 5-6 weeks, as we already identified. But on the season, he's still tight end 2. But I would if you look at like since, I don't want to say her name, but since then, he's just barely cracking the top 10.
Yeah, I know. It has nothing to do with her, but yeah.
I know, but it's fun to say it.
All right. I don't think so.
I won't mention it again. I won't mention
it. Okay. It doesn't matter. I'm not one of those guys that gets all upset about mentions of her. I just think it's just pop
it's
culture.
Silly. It's silly. It is silly.
It brings more people to watch football, and that's good. And my kids love Taylor Swift. So
that's exactly what the NFL needs. More people watching football. Here, I'm looking it up right now. So weeks 8 through 16, Jeff, Travis Kelce is tight end 9.
Yeah. Yeah. He's been very ordinary. You can't get around that there. All right. Other takeaways from Miami-Dallas. Dallas, I mean, CeeDee Lamb was crushing it in the first quarter. Crushing it. He went like the entire second quarter without a target. Some of that was a pass rush issue. The thing that I think was the biggest factor in this game that was not mentioned enough was Tyron Smith's injury. The pass rush got to Dak a lot in this game, and it all had to do with the fact that their world-class left tackle was not there. And this has happened before.
Yep. But I mean, this is going to happen. It happened to the 49ers last night with Trent Williams, right? It's like, these are this part of the season. You're going to have to live with offensive lines that are banged up, star players that aren't playing well. Maybe that, like you said, we always think of like Dallas as having like this elite offensive line. I think it's been okay, right? I mean, they've been, a top half of the league offensive line. I just think that they need they need something else besides just feeding CeeDee Lamb. I mean, Brandon Cooks had that nice touchdown catch, but other than that, man, what else do they have? I mean, Jake Ferguson, it's not like he's an elite tight end. He's just been like, hey, he's what
pretty good.
He's pretty good. He was a very plus replacement for what they lost in Dalton Schultz, right? Correct. He's like exactly what you want for like a third or fourth option, but he's playing up. Like he's been the second guy, right? I mean, you get a couple splash plays from Jalen Tolbert, which, by the way, man, you a couple weeks ago
contested catch.
Woo. Yes, and yeah. I'm going to give you full credit here. I'm going to victory lap for you. You called out Tolbert on Sneaky Ads video that we do a few weeks before it happened. I thought I was laughing. I was snickering at you, and meanwhile, the guy looks like he's a real player. So. I apologize. I'm coming back. I'm kissing your toes, Jeff Erickson. But I just think that this is
toes.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Gross.
Oh, I was doing my best Rex Ryan right there. Yeah. It's just that Tony Pollard is not. I hate to say this. He's not what Zeke Elliott was, right? Like a lead.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. I got a point to make after you said that.
Yeah, no, just bottom line was Tony Pollard was the classic guy that was better in the role he had, not as a lead back. And I think that's what they're missing. They get in low. You saw Pollard get stuffed a couple times. So if you're not going to have a second alpha pass catcher, man, the running game looks like it's limping along.
Zeke does not get tackled at the inch line on that play in the first quarter like Pollard did. He got his progress got immediately stopped. For all intents and purposes, he looked like he was a walk-in touchdown, and somehow he got a first down, got stopped, and then the subsequent play, the fullback fumbles the ball. Remember that. They called a stupid fullback play. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. You get that. You deserve that. But Zeke scores that touchdown. Yep. No doubt in my mind, Zeke scores that touchdown.
They went to that fullback because he converted on 4th and 1 twice, right? On that drive. Yeah. And they're like, oh, what it worked twice.
We got this toy. This is our tush push.
What could go wrong? Yeah. It worked twice. Like, again, to use the blackjack reference, you hit on 19 and it worked twice. Don't do it again. That's not a process. That's like you got away with it twice.
Yeah. Get the ball in the hands of your best players. Period.
Yep.
And turns out that mattered a lot. So there it goes. All right. Tampa Bay, Jacksonville. I made a tragic starting lineup decision in the NFFC. I don't think I would have. I'm in play for winning any overall money anyhow, but I benched Jordan Love at the last minute and put Trevor Lawrence back in because my logic being is, okay, they're going to be without Jaden Reed. They're already without Christian Watson. It's Carolina are probably going to run the ball a ton. They did run the ball a ton early on. And Lawrence, he's cleared from the concussion. He's good to go. but Lawrence doesn't have Christian Kirk. That was a stupid decision by me. It was just dumb. Yeah, I big regret. Now Lawrence is banged up yet again. It might have been just one of those, okay, we're getting our butts kicked, let's rest them sort of thing too. They've lost 3 in a row. Poor Nick, he doesn't have to do the recap on this one here at least. But man, Lawrence has not looked good lately.
Not looked good lately. He has not lived up to his billing. And when Trevor Lawrence was coming out, one of the things I was talking about on the RotoWire podcast was the reason he's such an elite prospect is because he cannot fail. His floor is so high. Man, that floor hasn't even been there, Jeff Erickson. Not in fantasy football, not in real football. We've seen flashes of the upside, but here's the question the Jaguars are going to have. Let's say they finally make it in the playoffs, right? Last year they had the great upset win. Let's say they get bounced in the first round. Next year's the year where they have to make that, they have to commit the $250 million over however many years to Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you have to do it probably, right? Because what's the other option? But if you're a Jacksonville fan, you're not like pumped about that, right? I mean, or are you? Is it just that, there's been other circumstances in your opinion that have prevented him from? I thought this was the year he was going to go into the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes tier.
Yeah, I don't know if I had him that high, but
that was the upside.
Definitely in okay, these are the top 7 quarterbacks you got. If you really should get one of them. Well, it didn't work out with Lawrence from a production or health standpoint. It didn't work out with Burrow from a health standpoint. And it turns out it's not working out with Herbert from a health standpoint either. I mean, it's been pretty disastrous when you needed the most. Lawrence at least got that one touchdown in the second half. He got you over 200 yards. He got you those 29 rush yards. The fact is, Jacksonville couldn't run the ball at all in this game. And they haven't been able to run the ball lately. The last, ETN was so amazing early in the season, and he's been such a disaster late. 6 carries for 12 yards, Alan. They don't use him in the passing game that much. 3 catches for 19. He's that's been a full-on disaster lately. I mean, a guy that was a top 5 fantasy running back is barely startable now.
Yes, all those facts are true. I still like what I see out of ETN. I don't think it's
great, but the offensive line's crap.
There it is. There's your answer. It's like, but you still got to start them, right? I can't imagine that you have it. Maybe if you're in a 10-team league and you're in a championship and you have James Conner, sure, that's a better start. But I can't imagine for most of the sophisticated players that are in these like 14, 16-team leagues or even 12-team leagues have better options. But you're right. It's not like it's a confident auto start. He's just hey, he's done it for the year, but there's been problems here. Evan Ingram, that's who I want to highlight here, Jeff Erickson, because
Alan
he
Seslowsky.
Yeah. You don't like when I say your full name?
No, I don't mind at all. I'm just answering in kind.
Okay, there you go. 10 catches, 95 yards. I have had and I'm just, venting to the world right now. Okay. I've had an agonizing high-class problem over the last few weeks, and it's cost me every week. Trey McBride or Evan Ingram, I've gotten it wrong every week in the playoffs, when they've been alternating go-off weeks.
Yeah.
And what the answer was, it cost me in the RotoWire Vegas League. What the real answer was start both of them and bench Tony Pollard, right? Because I could have done that in our league.
But who does that? Nobody does that though. That's the problem. You say that's the Tuesday morning quarterbacking right there. Like, oh, I should have done that because you had the benefit of 100% hindsight. But no one's ever benching Pollard. I'm sorry.
You are right, and neither did I. So what does that say? It says that, there was no answer. But, it's Evan Ingram, I think, was in hindsight. And, again, like you said, Tuesday morning quarterback is a great way to say it, right? We usually say Monday morning quarterback, but now with all these freaking games on Monday, it is Tuesday morning quarterback. But Evan Ingram is basically filled the Christian Kirk role because Evan Ingram is a quasi wide receiver, had that amazing breakout in year 1, then basically falls off the fantasy map. And now with a better situation and now the opportunity, he has become a league winner. I guess, is that the right word? And by the way, Evan Ingram's career trajectory gives me hope for Kyle Pitts because Kyle Pitts had a little bit of a breakout in year 1. Then has really been a fantasy disappointment. So if his circumstances change, I think he can be Evan Ingram either next year or the year after. But back to this game, other side of the football, Jeff, Tampa Bay.
Well, before we do that, one other point. ETN faces Carolina this week.
Got to play him.
Got to play him. All right. Other side of the ball. We had a question on the other side of the ball. So go ahead and let's talk Tampa.
Yeah. So Baker Mayfield has been one of the best 10 real life quarterbacks and probably the best 9 fantasy quarterbacks when it mattered. Without looking, do you know how much Tampa Bay signed Baker Mayfield for on this deal, this 1-year deal?
Like
take a
$4
guess.
Million. It's like 4.
You yucked my yum. It was 8 million. And come on, Jeff. You could have
come on. You're using your list terminology.
Well, that's why I said it, right? You yucked my yum,
I knew it was cheap. I knew it was nothing.
Yeah.
But
so now what do you do?
I overestimated the nothingness there a little bit.
Right.
So.
I mean, Mitch Trubisky is making like 11 or 12 million for Christ's sakes.
Quarterbacks. Yeah. It's really remarkable that they've gotten this mileage. They're going to win. They're going to win the division probably. I mean, it's not done yet. They get big game against New Orleans this week. It's this week, right? That they play each other.
I believe
yes.
so. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And then I think they get Carolina in week 18. So, a lot of head-to-heads there, but anyhow, they're getting a hell of a lot of mileage. So we got concerns about like Connor O'Carroll's worried about Rachaad White.
What are you worried about?
The finals, but it's against the Saints. Ooh. Are you concerned about the matchup at all? Are you concerned about how it was like 20 for 39? The thing about Rachaad White is even when he doesn't run the ball effectively, he has 6 catches. He still scores. He gets the goal line carries. He's a 3-down back. I think he's an easy start, even if matchup concerns.
Rachaad White is a top 5 fantasy running back for the entire year. Like you just said, he doesn't need to be a good player with a good matchup to give you. This is fantasy magic. You get the guy in the 8th round, right? Remember when we were deciding on the clock, Jeff, this is the proverbial way. Should I take Miles Sanders? He's such a good value here. Or do I take Rachaad White? He stinks. One of those actually won you the league or got you to the fantasy finals. The other one, it basically was useless. So
the either or is not really an either or. It's a landslide decision. Yeah, I hate that, but it happens all the time.
And if you just look at the top of the running back rankings this year, okay, Christian McCaffrey, he finished exactly where you thought he would. But Raheem Mostert is the RB2, Rachaad White RB3. Jahmyr Gibbs, fine, and then Alvin Kamara is a top 7 running back in PPR leagues. He was kryptonite. Nobody wanted him. The suspension, he's aging, is the team situation.
Well, as soon as his suspension was announced and it was so much lower than we expected, I think that changed a lot.
A little bit. 3rd round, 4th round. I mean, he should have been.
He went later than that, even, I think.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like he should have been a 2nd round pick, right? I mean, in hindsight, Tuesday morning quarterback again. But back to the Rachaad White thing. Do not overthink this. You are putting him. I can't even think of a player that I would rank him as the 2nd running back, regardless of matchup this week after Christian McCaffrey. I can't think of anyone who I would have more confidence in that has a true floor with actual upside to go along with it.
Yeah. There was some this follow-up question was any concern about Mike Evans? Saints usually shut him down. Marshawn Lattimore is hurt. We'll see if Lattimore comes back this week. He hasn't even been designated to return from injured reserve. So we'll see. I mean, they get a long week coming into week 17. The game means a ton to the Saints and to the Bucs for that matter. But, Evans often gets shut down by Lattimore. If there's no Lattimore, I'm starting Evans. I'm starting Evans anyhow. Come on.
That's what I'm saying. I always wonder when we talk about should we start this wide receiver? He has this corner matchup. No, the corner matchup has to deal with Mike Evans. Sure, there's been a history of lower production, but this is a different year with a different quarterback. Baker Mayfield has told us week after week that Mike Evans is his first read, his second read, and sometimes he just locks on like a missile and just throws him the ball when he's not open. It's similar to what Johnny Manziel used to do with Mike Evans in college, right? I mean,
he got him drafted after all.
There you go. So Mike Evans you just play him regardless of matchup.
Godwin got 11 targets last week, though. It's interesting.
Yep, and he's a great player. But when the money was on the line with the touchdowns, this is not like a don't play Godwin take. This is you play Mike Evans. There's always I think 2 weeks ago or last week he had a down week, but he's winning you weeks, and it's normal wide receiver volatility. Jeff Erickson.
It is. All right, Chicago, Arizona. We got to start picking up the pace here, Alan. Because we got a lot of games still left. I think we're going to skip the Thursday game, but anyway. We kind of tangentially touched upon anything else. Chicago, Arizona. The Bears are a real team. They're good now. And the thing is, it's way too late to do anything in the playoffs this year, but I don't want my team facing them. From a real life standpoint, I don't want my fantasy players facing this defense.
Yeah, the very quick version here is James Conner is fully back. He's a workload. He's a professional running back. You're always starting him. Greg Dortch in a pinch. He always seems to come through. He's a good player. And then other than that, you're not really, Trey McBride. If you have him, that's the Arizona side of it. And then the Bear side is you talked about Khalil Herbert. He's in real consideration as a top 15 running back. And then, is Cole Kmet, did he get hurt or is he did
get banged up at the end of the game? So we'll have to check his status for sure.
Yeah. And DJ Moore looked dinged up after he came back, after he left. But I can't imagine if you're playing a 2-receiver league, DJ Moore, fine. You might have some other options, but if you're in a 3-receiver in a flex league, DJ Moore's in your lineup. You're just going to bet on the talent.
Yeah, you are. And and both Moore and Kmet got banged up in this game. Moore stayed in the game, but he didn't do a ton. So for what it's worth, but yeah, they also didn't need him to do a ton. Fields could have had an even bigger game. He had a long run call back due to a penalty and all that, but they were doing more design runs. It's like, where the hell was this earlier in the season? Like, why couldn't they be calling this all along? He looked so good at times. He also looked bafflingly bad at times too. I guess he threw that interception, but I think that was also a route issue too. It might have had something to do with the fact he had injured pass targets, but I don't know. Bears to me are they're like the Raiders. Like, you don't want your fancy players going up against them right now, and there's just legitimately decent team. Arizona's terrible.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating what happens next year with Justin Fields, being that if they have the first overall pick, they have Carolina's pick. Do they draft? Do they trade the pick? Do they trade Justin Fields? That's going to be the number one storyline leading up in the offseason, because another team is going to get Justin Fields if they trade him away, or do they keep both? I mean, that's really what the Justin Fields over these last couple games is going to answer that question for the Bears.
I don't think he's going to answer it. I think it's going to be more of the same, where it's like, yeah, I see the good stuff. I see the bad stuff. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I still don't know. I think we'll still not know after this season. I think we won't know after 2 years from now. I don't know. I think he'll be part of the whole massive quarterbacks that are in that vast middle. I don't think he'll be a star, but I think he's going to be like Trevor Lawrence, where, you're going to have to, I think. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I think the Bears aren't as committed. It's not their coaching staff that drafted him. I don't know.
What would you do if you have to make the decision right now today?
I would draft Marvin Harrison Jr. and keep or trade the pick to make, but I want Marvin Harrison Jr. I think that's part of it there. Right. And I know you're a dynasty player. I know you know who he is. So we can go that route, but
Marvin Harrison Jr. is already in ADP, just so you know, wide receiver 3 in dynasty startup drafts.
Jesus. I love it. I love that exists. I think that to me is just, it talks about our industry. I think it's pretty cool. We'll get to the day game slate, or the early slate on Sunday, but first, quick note from OddsR. Are you ready to revolutionize your sports betting approach? Begin with a 2-week free trial at oddsr.com, where cutting-edge AI technology sharpens your edge in the betting game. Benefit from our proven 2-year track record, boasting a 60% accuracy rate and an impressive 10% ROI. The OddsR AI meticulously sifts through extensive data to reveal high-value, green-value plays, guiding you towards smarter betting decisions. And it's not just about the numbers. The OddsR app is exceptionally user-friendly, crafted to be your go-to betting advisor right at your fingertips. Jumpstart your journey to betting smarter and more successfully. Simply visit the iOS or Google Play Store, download the OddsR app, and step into a world of confident betting. Your path to a more strategic betting experience starts with our 2-week free trial. Download today, where smart strategy triumphs over luck. Alan Seslowsky, if you were lucky, you started Amari Cooper and Joe Flacco this past week. My goodness. Flacco has been a wagon, too. I mean, it's been every single week. He's throwing for over 300 yards. Houston, all of a sudden, has fallen apart. Their defense looks terrible now, and Flacco carved it apart.
Just want to back up for a second here. Jeff Erickson, I have to say it here. I got to pay you a compliment.
Oh,
You have that very nice radio voice. When you're reading the reads, it really comes out because we're not talking like you have. It's almost like you have a little experience on the radio. And when I listen back, and it's hard for me to listen back to my own voice on the radio. I hear like the obnoxious Long Island accent. You really do have that polished radio voice. I mean, it's.
So I hate the sound of my own voice, like every other human hates the sound of their own voice, unless you're a really narcissist. But there's a Far Side commercial, cartoon, I should say, not commercial, Far Side cartoon. It says, "Oh, I don't really sound like that, do I?" I feel that way whenever time I hear my own voice.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I wanted to pay you that compliment. So yeah, Joe Flacco, 44 plus pass attempts over the month, right? Can you imagine averaging 44 pass attempts, 38-year-old Joe Flacco, 2.5 touchdowns per game. And like you measure the yardage is just like out of control. QB, he's a top 5. This is the crazy part about fantasy football is now it's short week, fantasy finals, and horrible matchup. Ooh, what do? I wouldn't be able to bench him. I mean, obviously, Amari Cooper, you're not benching him. If you have both of those guys, oh my God. Now, this could go wrong on you, but winning the big prize in fantasy football, no one's ever won it playing it safe.
Right.
You would have to have like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Patrick Mahomes is not in this conversation for me. Like Joe Flacco, even with the bad matchup, is going to be my starter over Tua. I mean, over any of these, over Jared Goff. I
can't do that. I can't do that. I'm sorry.
And the consensus is going to agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, and I get your point. I understand it. It's a very progressive way of thinking about things. I'm impressed. I can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot sit a guy that's this red hot because, look, Joe Flacco last year at the Jets was horrible. He looked washed, which really brings me to one conclusion. Like the coaching matters and team environment matters, which is an obvious take. Nobody, you don't need us to tell you that. But it is what it is, Jeff. Like sometimes it's, I don't know. You're just the matchup. If this was like a neutral, like the 15th best defense, you would be with me here. Is that what you're saying?
Say that again.
If it wasn't the Jets that were the matchup with Joe Flacco, you'd be riding him as like a top 5 quarterback at this point.
No, I would not.
Okay, so you're not there. You're not there.
Not there. Let me pull up. But it took a while to get Purdy there, and then Purdy turned into a pumpkin. Like, you're not going to start him over Lamar, are you?
No,
you're not going to start him over.
I go down the list.
Honestly, I wouldn't. I'd start Mahomes over him still.
I wouldn't.
And especially this week matchup, he gets the Bengals and Flacco gets. I think it's a revenge game for the Jets. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it's against
revenge game for the Jets. And by the way, if Cleveland and Baltimore play each other in the playoff, it's a revenge game for Flacco in Baltimore.
Yeah, I can't get there. I understand this. He's the old guy who just wears sweatpants all the time and doesn't give a damn. He's just flowing. He's just airing it out every time. He doesn't care about the picks. I feel like there's a Nick Mullins type of game here, which is good and bad. I don't think he's especially good. I think he's just taking advantage of some decent matchups. Like the Bears game, he was terrible in that game. He threw some bad picks, but he also connected on some big plays.
Gotcha.
They had to catch up. I mean, I don't know. He got there for you. It's kind of like Jake Browning getting there against the Steelers last week. He didn't play well. Flacco played well, obviously, yesterday or Sunday, but the week before against the Bears, he didn't play especially well.
44 pass attempts per game over a month sample. In football, 4 games is a lifetime. I mean, it's everything's small. So
I understand that. I've understand that they've given up on running the ball. I actually had to start Jerome Ford as a flex in one league, although I benched Herbert. I won't do that again.
Right. Well, that was the right call, though. Ford had been...
The process was right.
Yeah. Yes. The cards flipped over and you busted. I can get... If someone wants to push back on the argument that the Jets have basically made Justin Herbert look like, a backup quarterback, I can understand that. It's just that this team right now for fantasy football is just so hot. And when I get asked start sit questions... I try to say ride the heat, unless there's a clear and obvious answer why you wouldn't. So make your decision, man. I know if it was my team, that's how I would do it. but I'm curious to see where Joe Flacco ends up on your value meter that you publish on RotoWire.com.
My guess is it'll be around 15 or so this week, just because I think the matchup is terrible. So we'll see. Start Njoku, start Cooper. They're both gold. And then you move on. Detroit and Minnesota. Let's move on to this one here. Big win for Detroit, obviously. They clinched the division. Justin Jefferson looked amazing. It was heartening seeing that for next year. Frustrating because I told you this. I got all these notifications. Justin Jefferson has made a big play. Breece Hall has made a big play. Team that's been long eliminated would have crushed this week, but so it goes.
Turn off your notifications, man. That's cruel to yourself. Be good to yourself, Jeff Erickson.
I got to do that. I do need to do that. We may not have Hawkinson this week. We may have Addison. We may or may not have Addison. KJ Osborne's a live play if we don't have Addison. Even if we do, he looked pretty darn good at a couple on those deep balls there. If there's no Hawkinson, it may just go, 11 personnel a little bit more. Just throw more to Osborne.
Yeah, it's Hawkinson was on his way to a big day too. Ended up with 4 receptions for 58 yards. Even Johnny Munt, number 86 on the Minnesota, caught a 23-yard pass.
And so Arnold too. Yeah, the Munt play was a trick play though. So that's why that he got that one. It was like it was a flea flicker and almost in the red zone. It's very rare to see that there, but it worked.
Josh Oliver caught a 30-yard pass. That's what I'm saying. Like these, all in all, these were earmarked for Hawkinson once Addison was out of the game. And I like that you underlined KJ Osborne because he's in week 17 of your championship. We do a waiver wire video, we do articles, but how many of these guys could you actually pick up and play? I think you identified the actual only guy in the wide receiver rankings that you could pick up and put in your lineup, and you're confident because he seems the reason that wide receivers are so volatile is because they're never 1-for-1 replacements of the player that got injured. KJ Osborne has proven this year that when he is the target number 2, that you're going to get 5 for 75 or 5 for 60. And then if you get the touchdown like he did on Sunday, you're in business. So I love the KJ Osborne call out there by you.
Yeah. By the way, other takeaways, Gibbs over Montgomery now. He's getting more work. He did have that fumble, but he's getting goal line work now. Montgomery's not guaranteed that anymore. So
Gibbs is my RB1 in Dynasty. I mean, if you're Christian McCaffrey's the redraft one but at 28 years old next year, I think when you talk about age adjusted rankings, Gibbs, I mean, I can't see why you wouldn't have him as a top 1, 2, or 3 in your rankings in long-term leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Ty Chandler, quickly. Did you play him and get disappointed this week after the big game the week before?
I didn't have him in leagues where I'm alive. But I would have. And I would do so again because it's just not Madison anymore, which is about time.
Yeah, totally. And he's in if he's in play next year for like the 1A role because running back is probably not an area where they're going to like fully address. Like they have other needs, the Vikings. So it's probably these two guys again, maybe with a street veteran that, a Miles Sanders type. I know not him himself. He's under contract, but it'll be Madison. Ty Chandler is probably the lead back. So I'm interested to see how he finishes as well.
Yeah. I think you're right about that. Okay. Let's move on. But to Green Bay and Carolina. This turned out to be a game at the end. Looked like Carolina, that Green Bay is firmly in control. But then the Packers somehow gave up 30 points to Bryce Young and 300 yards to Bryce Young. I'm surprised Joe Barry wasn't fired on the tarmac. I know if Joe Bartle or Nick Whalen or any of the other Madisonites in the RotoWire Mafia had any say at all of this, Joe Barry would be fired like 17 times over.
Fired him at halftime on the loudspeaker. Isn't that what you guys used to say?
That was a list statement. Yes.
Yeah.
I use that one now every once in a while.
Yeah, it's a good one. For the Packers, the good news is that Aaron Jones, because I was writing him off as washed. He looked pretty good to me. 21 carries, 127 yards, Jeff. That's 6 yards per carry. That's good, right? That's good. The Green Bay is the youngest wide receiver core in the NFL. So I like Jordan Love for that reason, that he's growing with these guys. Jordan Love has had the most interesting season where it was high, but there was reason to explain why for fantasy football he was doing well. It was an unsustainable touchdown rate, then came down, and now he looks like a player that they're going to be confidently starting in 2024. And all of these young wide receivers, if we can get them on the field at the same time. You had an interesting call out earlier with Bo Melton. Wow, that guy, he was a like a 7th round pick a couple of years ago, and 4 catches for 44 yards. And then you also mentioned Bryce Young. The Carolina Panther fans have to just be like, okay, at least we saw one game, right? I mean, at least there's something now to build on here, and that you could feel confident about going into the offseason, because it's just been like a complete disaster. And then the last player that I think we need to highlight here is Chuba Hubbard. Heading into this week, Jeff, was a top 10 running back in actual production over like the last month or so. He's obviously better than Miles Sanders, and I guess really with he had 43 yards rushing and a touchdown, and did have 1 catch for 8 yards. I mean, are you confidently starting him in a league? Where's he going to be on your value meter? Really is the question.
Yeah, I used him in DFS last week. Got that touchdown late. It was kind of a saver there. It was because he wasn't great. Given the matchup, it was a game flow thing that screwed us there, that he wasn't getting the volume, but we got that touchdown, so it saved it. Last week, I had Chuba Hubbard at 13. So yeah, I'm pretty close on him, but I had him over Bijan. I had him over Derrick Henry. I had him over Kenneth Walker, over Achane, over Montgomery. There's some good names here. That's the thing with every team playing. Like, there's always going to be that, I can't believe you have this guy this low. And some of these guys are falling into that right now.
Yep. And then lastly, Amir Smith-Marset. He looks like a real player. And the only reason that he fell in like the real NFL draft, I think there was some off the field concerns, but he had I think it was a reverse or a rushing play for a touchdown. I'd be interested. He only had 1 reception for 18 yards as a receiver.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just saying for next year, and you're, in like deep dynasty leagues, he's actually out there and available for pickup. So I saw enough where I was like, oh, okay. I remember he had some hype as a rookie, but yeah, in your fantasy file or anything like that, no. But this team is looking for young playmakers. I mean, is Adam Thielen really going to be back as your number 1 wide receiver next year?
No, it's Mingo, but they didn't use him this week. That's the thing. It was Chark week. Discovery week failed us. Discovery Channel failed us. That was my good joke on Twitter. And if more people were on Twitter, would have gotten more play, but it was a good one.
That was a good one. I like it.
But Chark has had 2 good weeks in a row, and he balled out. He had some really nice plays, but I'm concerned because Mingo was, steadily getting 7-8 targets a week, and he got like 1 last week.
Yeah, and like you said, DJ Shark gets in the end zone twice. I think was he on a 1 or a 2 year deal? I'd be interested. I mean, it sounds like that the team, if he finishes the season like this, that the team will be interested in bringing him back, because they don't have a 1st round pick, Carolina, and they need ascending wide receiver pass catcher help. Mingo is a good call out as well, because he had been coming on. And that's the only reason I underline Amir Smith-Marset, because he's flashing. And I'm not saying he's like your lead guy, but it's someone that it caught my attention while watching the game.
Fair enough. Very good. Washington and the Jets. How did Washington almost win this game? I mean, the Jets were at 27-7 and they're looking hideous. I guess the answer is they switched quarterbacks, but oh my goodness, what a ridiculous collapse. And what's it going to take for Jacoby Brissett to start this week?
Well, I mean, at this point, you just want to see how Sam Howell responds. I mean, Ron Rivera, he's basically clinging to the thing that Leonardo DiCaprio was when he went overboard in the Titanic, that door for his job, right? Like he's sinking quick on the Titanic. So he just needs wins, right? Because he needs to do anything. He can't have like this complete losing culture. So that's the case for Jacoby Brissett. But if the team was really interested, and I know you've had like most of the season of Sam Howell, you do want to see how he responds to adversity to see if he is your guy. Washington's now in striking distance of getting an elite quarterback if they want one. So I would still start Sam Howell. By the way, coming into this game, the 32nd ranked offense, New York Jets, versus the 32nd ranked defense, Washington Commanders. I mean, what could have gone wrong?
Yeah. Exactly. This was an easy decision to bury Howell. But it's just, this is 2 weeks in a row where Brissett's come in and balled out after Howell's stunk up the joint. So
C-Rod, though. C-Rod. Chris Rodriguez is the story of Washington.
Yeah, but he's hurt now. That's the
Oh, he got banged up? I must have missed that. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll bring up the specific injury, but yeah,
Right.
it's a guy I discussed with Chris on his pod today is also, but he was in a walking boot after the game.
Okay, that's not good because I put him out there on an early, as like, hey, Chris Rodriguez looks like a player.
He does.
Yeah,
He looks good. I mean, I agree. They face the Niners this week too. That's the other problem. So you're not going to get a whole lot of running
looking for blood.
Yeah,
Niners
yeah, for sure, but it's just a bad matchup too. The Commanders will go to many wide links to make sure that you don't get any play for Antonio Gibson.
He's a complete free agent next year, so I'm interested to see where. I still like Antonio Gibson. Remember, he was a college wide receiver, did not play running back. He had a few rushes in college, but he was a wide receiver for Memphis that was converted to running back. So I'm wondering if he ends up being more of like what we wanted Laviska Shenault to be, or what Percy Harvin was at his peak. Like, I still believe that at age 25, with a new fresh start on a fresh team, that Antonio Gibson is going to be someone that I'm interested in next season.
I can see it. I can definitely see it there. Any other takeaways from this game? Breece Hall goes off on everybody's dormant fantasy team because they've already been eliminated.
Yeah, Breece
Hall.
Hall
Still have Breece Hall active in the finals this week? If
yeah,
so,
I mean,
congratulations.
They went against me, the guy who I was in my game. I lost a fantasy game by 1.2 points, Jeff, going against Breece Hall. I told you that was the team where I needed Barkley to get one more catch, and I would have vaulted past the guy. Nobody cares about my team. But the ACL injury that happened in week 7 with Hall, this is a very quick point, is that it's usually 10 months to return to play with ACL, about 18 months to return to full steam here. He looks like he's full steam. I think that he is in consideration for a top 7 pick next year in fantasy drafts.
Agreed. And I think his problems this year have been less about him and more about the offensive line anyhow. And the tragic quarterback play. When you're facing 37 people in the box, it's tough against that Civ-like offensive line. So yeah, I don't blame his struggles on him. Atlanta, Indy. Let's just move on to that one there. Hey, Bijan Robinson, they gave him touches. They won. Who knew? Algier looked good too, actually. I told you I have a fantasy championship team where I started Algier, but over Kareem Hunt, by the way. That was my choice that I have every single week. Anywho,
bigger conflict. Is it in the Middle East, or is it is it Arthur Smith versus fantasy players? Which one's more contentious?
Well, I'd say Arthur Smith can get fired someday, so it's solvable.
Ship him out. That's the joke, the FedEx.
Yeah,
joke.
I got it. Yeah. If you absolutely positively need to have it last year, do it.
Very. Kyle Pitts. I think that's an interesting storyline. 3 for 49 and a touchdown. Right. I mean,
you knew you got your production early out of him. Yep.
So I had benched him for Dallas Goedert. Well, that actually worked out, but Kyle Pitts, man, it's and Drake London, another 3 for 39 game. So fine. We get our Bijan, our 12 carries for 72 yards. We get our 7 catches for 50 yards. But now the other 2 guys don't produce, right? I mean, that's the
scored. I mean, you got that, but
right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's all you could hope for. But that's what I think is like he's
in that territory for tight ends, by the way, Kyle Pitts. If he scores a touchdown, great. Otherwise, he's no longer in my top 10. He's like 15th every week now.
Peak Gerald Everett.
Oh, wow. Ouch. New coach, please rescue him. And they need a quarterback too, though. That's their other problem.
They'll be Gardner Minshew will be fully available for a team like that. I mean, that's like the perfect guy, right? Like we used to say.
They already have that perfect guy in Taylor Heineke, though. They're the same guy. And Nick Mullins, they're all that guy.
Well, we used to use, you remember like a half a decade ago, we used to use Andy Dalton as the Mendoza line for like, hey, he can carry an offense. Now it's Gardner Minshew. I think Gardner Minshew has proven to be a little bit at the top of that like tier that buoys an offense.
Yeah. I think that's right. I like that. I think that line is a good one there. Any other? So Colts side though, Gardner Minshew was terrible in this game.
Speak of the devil.
He was terrible, and that's the thing is he has this range of outcomes. By the way, you bet on Atlanta at home and fade the heck out of them on the road, especially outside of the division. But the Colts, That's the thing is like they're a weird team too. I mean, they were well positioned to go in the playoffs, but they just got smashed in this game. The Bengals smashed them 3 weeks ago. I don't know, man. I mean, they did destroy the Steelers, but it just like you don't know which version of them is going to show up in any given week.
Yeah, Michael Pittman is the reason why. I mean, with Michael Pittman, he's like a younger Mike Evans, right? At this point, right? Like he's a guy that like nobody is like. He's not a sexy pick in fantasy drafts,
right?
But he's just going to produce year in, year out. And it was very strange with Michael Pittman because he was in the concussion protocol, so you were banking on not having him, and then he cleared and was like ready to go back in. You put him in your fantasy lineups as you're tinkering through the week, and then like late in the week they said no, he's not going to play. And I think that directly correlates with Gardner Minshew's poor play. Gardner Minshew is not an elevator. He's going to be as good as the talent around him. Take Michael Pittman, who I think we can agree at this point is a top 12 real life NFL wide receiver.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, and he had those concussions. That shows how tricky concussions are because he had cleared the protocol entirely, and then experienced symptoms on the flight basically to Atlanta on Saturday. So, and this is, and I saw the tales of woe. People had benched George Pickens and started under knowing that they had Michael Pittman, and
oh, that's a bad one.
Yeah,
talk about bad beat. That's a bad one.
It is a bad beat. Anything else from this? No, let's move on. Seattle, Tennessee. This one was Seattle almost found a way to kind of choke their way out of the playoffs. Had a great drive, saved their season. Now they're a playoff team along with the Rams. They both look like they're going to make it. It was a massive win for them. Massive win. Can't understate how important it was for them to win that game.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel good about Seattle? Like, do you think that they're someone that can win a playoff game? Should they make it in?
So here's the thing. I think Seattle can win a playoff game, or they could lose by 30.
Okay, you know what? That is right on. Right, they are a team that has enough talent if everything goes right. But you've seen it fall apart. If there's a little poke, if there's a little spark plug missing in the Ferrari, the whole thing shuts down. That's such a good.
Right now, they're projected to go to Philadelphia, who they just beat on Monday night, albeit at home, and I could see them losing to 30 at Philly.
Oh, that's
in a 2-7 matchup there. I could see that happening. I could see them upsetting Philly again, though, too. I mean, I could see that happening. I mean, they're just but I don't see them stringing together 2 to 3 games. That's the thing. I could see them having one good game in the playoffs and then getting smashed the next week.
Yeah, which really just means that our fantasy playoff leagues where you draft players and you see it's
due this year
is going to. So Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey will be picked 1 and 2, depending on which one you want, and then after that, game on, right? Like, just pick a team and stack them in your playoff leagues.
Well, especially because the Ravens, their players aren't fantasy friendly. It's Lamar and then ... I mean, Zay Flowers is a good player. Gus Edwards scores touchdowns, but he doesn't do much else. Andrews is out. If Andrews were healthy, he'd be a first-round pick in fantasy playoff drafts. But yeah, I mean, it's really weird how the Ravens don't have. They're such a good team, and yet they don't have the fantasy components.
And by the way, if we do when we do our fantasy playoff leagues, we're doing 3rd round reversal. You cannot give the Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy guy, an early 3rd round pick. You just can't.
Fair. I could see that happening.
Yep.
I agree with you on that. All right. Before we hit up the Saturday games, and we won't even deal with Thursday because that was such a long time ago, but a quick note from our friends at SmashUp Fantasy Sports. Are you one of the many sports fans who are not ready for the fantasy season to end? Then you have to play SmashUp Fantasy Sports, the fastest growing free game. In SmashUp, your traditional fantasy team gets supercharged by Smash Cards, which are like video game power-ups that pick you to boost the scores of your players or even your entire team. Think your kicker is going to have a big game? Then choose card like Big Kick Energy to power them up.
Yeah, very good.
Are you starting Justin Fields? Then play Scramble Spikes to score more from his running. Paired with cool video game-like visuals, SmashUp is the biggest innovation in fantasy sports in a very long time and really feels like it was designed for sports fans. And here's the best part. You can play for free and win fantastic prizes. No credit card needed, no hidden fees. All users receive 3 entries per week, but with our code RotoWire, you'll unlock a 4th entry every week through the Super Bowl. And if you use our promo code or join the group RotoWire from your profile, You can play against us in our private tournament for a chance to win a free RotoWire fantasy football subscription. Enter now at smashupsports.com and join the future of fantasy sports. Thank you for SmashUp for joining our podcast here. All right, real quick here. Let's hit up the Saturday games. The Peacock game, Buffalo and the Chargers. Chargers gave them a game. It was the dead coach gone bounce, the dead cat bounce, if you will. Staley's gone, ding dong, the witch is dead. The Chargers were very spirited in this game. Buffalo pulls it out at the end. Alan, I'm a pretty tech savvy guy. I subscribe to various services, all that. I did not realize until the fourth quarter that the game was being broadcast locally on my NBC affiliate because it's the LA Chargers. And you get, so it wasn't exclusively on Peacock. So I was fussing around trying to get into Peacock because I don't have Peacock yet. And it's also 30 seconds ahead of the Peacock feed too. So I was like, I'm a really smart guy, but I don't know how to use the guide button on my remote apparently. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, this technologically, this is a very smart move for the NFL to try to test out games. It's inconvenient for the fans in the short term.
It's horrible.
But I gave you the code, right? I mean, 6 months ago, I sent you the code.
Cheating.
Well,
but it's terrible for the fan to have 17 different platforms to try to watch a damn game. And there's going to be a playoff game on Peacock too. It's so, and it won't be broadcast locally. I know that. Won't be the Chargers, maybe the Rams. I don't know, but I think it's an AFC game. I think it's terrible. I think it's horrible. We pay so much. If you pay for Red Zone, you pay for, whatever service you have to watch your games. Then you have to watch the Amazon games and then a Peacock game, and baseball, there's the Apple games. Stop. It's so much worse than it used to be before. You're paying way more after cutting the cord. You're ending up paying more.
Well,
games.
Yeah, cord cutting was cool 7-8 years ago, but now it's going back. We want is consolidation, right? That's all we want at this point. Yes, be careful what you wish for.
We had a great system.
Yeah. No, the problem is this is the future. Everything's going to be sold a la carte. If you want a premium product like the NFL, just like when you go to a steakhouse, there's no sides. Oh wait, the steak is $64.95. They don't sell you sides of that. You have to order, the spinach for $13.95, and then the mushrooms for $16. I mean, that's the future of the NFL. That, by the way, it's the future of sports. That in-season tournament they're doing for the NBA. The reason they're doing that is so they could sell it a la carte to Apple or whoever, Netflix.
Yeah.
I mean,
I will say this. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered.
Interesting.
I think they're it's reaching that demarcation point where people are going to say, screw it, I'm not going to do it. There'll be a subset of people that will pay for everything, right? Me, I'm that guy probably, but I guarantee people are going to start walking away from that.
Well, what they need is, they need one app to stream them all. If there's an app that was called like the Jeff Erickson app, and then it doesn't matter. Like, you wouldn't know if you were streaming on Apple or streaming on this or streaming on that. It was just all inside the Jeff Erickson app, right? And it looked like your program guide that used to have on like Xfinity or Comcast or AT&T or Direct. Then it would be cool. And then all the streamers can still get their money, but it would all be so whoever creates that one master app, I think that's the answer to all this fragmentation, but that's for another day,
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, it's not like price point's my biggest issue. I mean, I paid for Sunday Ticket. That was the whole point of Sunday Ticket, is to have everything.
And think about when you're watching Amazon, watching a standalone NFL game is inconvenient because of all the commercials and the interruptions.
Yeah.
So in the past, if you were watching a standalone NFL game, you could channel flip, you could see what's on in the news, you could see what's going on in your basketball game. You can't, it's so hard to go out of Prime into your TV. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. One app to stream them all is really the answer.
And I really want to miss those hot flashes commercials that every single Amazon game has. Like, come on, know your target audience, for crying out loud.
They're figuring it out, but I like streaming in general because I can watch on any device. I'm in the shower, Jeff, with my phone watching NFL Sunday Ticket while I'm scrubbing under my armpits.
Stop with the visuals, dude. Stop with the visuals.
You're lucky I said armpits. You're lucky I said all right.
No, you're lucky. I mean,
cancel culture. But yeah, back to this game. You were talking about the Bills and Chargers, right? Yeah, James Cook. Didn't
disappointing game.
Yeah, but Gabe Davis goes off on everyone's bench. That's what I love. He had 2 zeros in a row. more or less, right? Two very low games. And Dalton Kincaid had 2 very bad games. So I needed to pick in my flex because I had like a normal tight end going of which one of these guys, and I picked it wrong. I picked Kincaid, and that was the difference. And, like I said, so Gabe Davis, I mean, he pushes feast or famine to the utmost extreme. I mean, you get a 0 or you win your week because of him. There's no like 6-point game from him.
Yeah, 100% agree. My wife is. I have a league that my wife and I are both playing in, and she has Gabe Davis on her bench, and she had Cooper Kupp and Elijah Moore active. I think she is ranting today. She went up against Amari Cooper. She was the number 1 seed and got knocked out, and she it's been hot fire this whole weekend on that one there.
Did you explain to her? Oh, she's still in the mindset,
right?
Oh,
don't try to mansplain this. Don't even try to do that. That's a bad idea. I tried. Just don't.
Yeah,
but but we need to talk Stephon Diggs for real though, because ever since Joe Brady was named the offensive coordinator, Diggs' production has been very pedestrian, Alan. I mean, the emphasis on running the ball has had a direct impact on hurting Diggs to the point where some people are probably like, I don't want to have to start him in my final. I do have him. And that was the team, the team I was talking about with my crappy running backs. I have Cooper, I have Diggs, I have Lamb, and I have Keenan Allen. That's how I made it as far as I did. I have stud wide receivers, but Diggs has been terrible lately.
5 of the first 6 weeks, Jeff Erickson, he has 100 yards or more.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Since then, 0 100-yard games.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know this.
You said terrible. I'm just opening up the hood to explain how terrible.
Yes.
This was your first round pick.
Yes.
This is a player that you took at pick 10 and were so psyched after the first month of the season. You had it made. And he's not, we talk about league winners. He's a league loser, right? This is why you didn't start.
And I'm starting him this week too, by the way.
I mean, you're going to have the stones to bench him against Miami?
No, I'm starting him. Starting him, and and I don't have Keenan Allen. That's part of it. And
I said Miami. It's New England. He's playing New England. Sorry.
Yeah, that's worse. I think. I don't know. Maybe. Well, CD Lamb got his last week, so yeah. And Buffalo's playing for something too. So I'm at least I'm excited about. So
we haven't seen any squeaky wheel though from him. That's usually it's Stephon Diggs complains and then he gets peppered with 14 targets.
They're winning. How can he?
That's it, right? You're right. He doesn't really. Then he would seem like the bad teammate. Is he a first round pick next year?
No.
Second?
No, he's probably, but he's clearly. I mean, you're not going to take him over Lamb. You're not going to take him.
Well, Lamb's a top 3 pick next year, top 4 pick. You're taking.
Let's take a look. Let's do this.
Yeah. So we did a like a mock draft. I did one with Liss on the RotoWire podcast, and he took Lamb at pick 2. He's like, why am I going to take Jefferson when I don't know the QB? Why am I going to take Chase when he's had a few in and outs of the lineup? He's like,
right now, you're taking both those guys over Diggs, and it's not even close.
Oh yeah.
You're taking Tyreek over him, taking AJ Brown over him.
That's where
you're taking Amon-Ra St. Brown, your favorite player, ahead of him. You're taking Cooper Kupp ahead of Diggs next year. I
would take Puka over both of them.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
Yeah.
Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans, no matter where, depending on where he lands versus Stephon Diggs, I'm thinking for just 1 year, I'd probably take Evans. Get out, take off your dynasty hat for a second there.
Here's the question. I think it's like you get into the Garrett Wilsons, the Breece Halls, like with Rodgers. Where does Diggs line up against those guys?
Yeah. He might end up being a tremendous bargain too, but unless things change because right now this is working. There's less reliance on Josh Allen playing hero ball, which means less reliance on Diggs, and they're winning.
Yep. The Kyron Williams is a potential late first round pick next year.
Yeah, I could see it.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think Diggs is a second rounder. And I don't think it's even that close. I don't think it's a bad pick in the second round, but I don't think it's close either.
From pick 8 to 20, you're going to see it. Like when we did this mock draft, which is on the RotoWire YouTube page, there's no distinction between pick 8 and pick 17, 19, 20, something like that. Like all those guys you would take at pick 8 or at pick 20.
What that tells me is I want to get
top 7.
Yeah.
AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown cutoff.
Yeah. I want to get an early pick. because I think you're going to get someone great in the second round. Yeah, things will have a way of sorting itself out. All right. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, nothing happened. Let's move on to Thursday. No. Okay. So the Bengals, basically, as their season ended, they got like a 12% chance of making the playoffs now or something like that. And it was never close. It was just never close. That game, I mean, the Pickens gets the long touchdown right away, and you're like, here we go. And Awuzie got wasted a couple of times by Pickens. That second touchdown was the kill. Actually was the real killer. It was OJ finding the real killer. I found the real killer. That was it right there.
That's good. So just want to go back to Pickens for a second, because like we've been waiting for him, right? Do you think that this is going to carry? Is it Mason Rudolph that unlocked him, or is it that George Pickens was a little more engaged? Because it's not just like that Pickens had like 5 catches for like 80 yards and a touchdown. He had 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. This was like old school Josh Gordon type of stuff he was doing.
This was Chidobe Awuzie unlocking him.
Okay.
Left on the island on one of those, and just a bad tackle coverage attempt on the first one. The first one, that slant, I mean, it was similar to T. Higgins taking it to the house on his is also just terrible, like path taken by the defender to him, and then exacerbated by like the Bengals kind of got in each other's way. I mean, it was just bad all around. Pickens is great, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's necessarily unlocked with Mason Rudolph. I think it was just this was the 95th percentile, 99th percentile performance result.
Did anybody make the Rudolph on Christmas joke?
Everybody.
Okay. All right. I figured. Yeah. When I have a thought like that, I always think like 17 other people. Yeah. Like that's why I
thought of it first. Yeah.
I know I did,
as my kids like to say.
Yeah. That one, it's just so obvious that just like the Tommy DeVito, that he got whacked. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's worth saying, but not saying like, hey, I have this great thought. It's to say like, hey, has anyone said this?
Oh, and I'm just as guilty of doing that too, by the way.
Yeah.
So,
well, no, I'm saying
my dad, so I make jokes that are like dads. So there you go. Yeah. But Jake Browning got exposed in this one a little bit. He made some bad decisions. That the interception in the end zone was horrific. It was 7-0 at the time. Just get points. Yeah, they're in field goal range. The one thing you can't do is just throw it up for grabs. I mean, it wasn't even like there was a receiver in the area. It wasn't like you saw an open receiver. He just threw it blindly. That's a backup quarterback right there. That's the type of throw that cost him money in the offseason.
Oh, so you think Jake Browning was headed towards like a bridge quarterback starting gig?
Yes, I think he was graduating into the Dalton zone.
Interesting, right?
Matt Flynn zone, if you will.
Oh, right. That's the ultimate.
That was the all-timer.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's almost good to happen because Jake Browning, financially. So, he would have been heading towards the $12-14 million deal, but he's probably better suited as a highly paid backup that could, like, the easy example is when Aaron Rodgers goes down next year for like 2 games, right? That he would be the perfect guy. Or if Joe Burrow, right? If they keep him there and he would give him the hometown discount. But yeah, you're right. He may have cost himself money, but it's these guys, as you outlined in the earlier part of the podcast, they expose themselves who they are. The T. Higgins, we need to talk about this only because he's going to be eligible for a franchise tag. If not, then he's a true free agent. From my perspective, you're a little bit close to this because you follow the team religiously. There's, in my eyes, no chance that he walks out that door.
Oh, I don't think he can be franchised. He's a 2nd-round pick, right?
So you can't franchise tag a 2nd round?
I got to double check on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can't. I thought you could. You can franchise tag anybody.
Yeah, that's right. I've seen kickers franchise before, so never mind. That's a stupid comment by me. Sorry.
So let's say so you basically pay him, I think it's the top 10 salaries of all you're basically going to be paying a top 10 salary for T. Higgins, but on a 1 year, if you can punt that down the road for 1 year, I mean, why, if you're not going to give him the multi-year deal because you have Chase coming up and now Burrow's contract is obviously in full bloom and you have other needs. I mean, it's just, you can't give these nucleuses up when they're in full bloom.
Agreed. And the thing is, I think you got, I mean, they paid Burrow, they paid Logan Wilson, they paid Pratt, they've got Chase still coming up. They let 2 safeties go, and the young secondary burned them some this year because of that. I mean, everything's got to fit. They got to figure out whether DJ Reader, who's out for the year, they can bring him back. That was a tough one. That was a really tough one, by the way. Losing Reader, he didn't play at all in this game. That hurt them a lot because Pittsburgh was able to do play action. That's why the running game, Najee Harris was more effective, which led to single coverage on Pickens. That's it all. Everything is kind of tied together there.
Yeah. T. Higgins, though, man, if he does walk out the door, I think we found Bryce Young's WR1 for next year.
Yeah, I could see it.
They'll pay him whatever he wants. They'll be like, hey, you want to own a piece of the franchise? They're so invested, the Carolina that is, in Bryce Young, that they need, I told you, the best true free agent next year in the wide receiver market is Gabe Davis. It's like Tyler Boyd. It's like these type of, right. Yeah. So if T. Higgins gets out the door, he might end up being the highest paid
which is
player.
why I think he gets out the door.
Interesting. Well, that's why I think they slap him with the tag.
Yeah, maybe so.
Because whatever he gets in the free market is going to be more than the franchise tag.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So we'll see. Yep. I think you're right about that. I think this is a good spot to end. We went an hour 40, even more than Waylon. Waylon's piker compared to your endurance here. No, just kidding.
Was I too verbose?
No, we just had a lot to say. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm kidding. Nick, we wish the best of Nick. He'll be back tonight for the Sirius XM Fantasy Show with me, and I looking forward to getting his take. But we'll be talking about all those stuff and more. But thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for all the comments in the chat. Do appreciate it there. Make sure to check out that free trial at RotoWire if you don't already subscribe. RotoWire.com/pod. And maybe you can give your loved ones a gift, a late Christmas gift for the new year. If you want to start checking out the site.
The baseball rankings are up.
Yeah, baseball draft kit is up.
Yeah,
we're continually posting stuff there. So rotowire.com/pod. No credit card trial. Free peek behind the paywall for a couple of days. Thanks for listening to RotoWire. Thanks to Alan for stepping in this week. Take care.